there's a really important key difference from the manga to the anime. And it actually makes a pretty big impact on the storyline. But Gyu smiling made my whole world just beam. Why? Hello there, my fandom friends. Today I'm going to be kind of recapping episode 2 of the Hashira training arc about Gyu Tomioka. Basically what this video is going to involve is me comparing the Demon Slayer manga 15 to the anime episodes that are coming out. And so the reason why I'm doing this is I really want to emphasize on the fact that they're adding so much anime original stuff that doesn't take place in the manga. And a lot of people who haven't read the manga are kind of bashing on it, saying that it's filler, that it's just kind of pointless, useless, and I kind of want to put a stop to that because what is being shown is very, very specific to foreshadowing things, making things more emotional down the line once we get a bit further in the story. It's all intentional. And so I'm going to be breaking it down. I hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. There's not going to be any manga spoilers past this part of the story. So we're basically just covering what is in this episode. Gyu, the scene with Shinobu, other little scenes, so we're not going into spoilers. There will be a spoiler warning at the end because I will be talking about spoilers just a little bit, but I'll give a warning, I always do. So this episode basically covers 2-ish chapters of the manga, although I'm gonna say that very loosely because there are things that happen in the manga that we've already seen in episode 1 of the manga, so it kind of skips around a bit. But the opening scene, which is what we're gonna start off with, is the scene that we have with Tamayo and Yushiro talking to the Ubuyashiki crow. And so we kind of talked about this in the last episode. That's how the last episode ended. And so we saw that in the manga, it was actually covered in chapter 131, although where we're at in the anime is technically 130. So we get this whole scene with Tamayo, we have her point of view. Something that we don't get in the manga is actually Yushiro's point of view. And so this is really interesting because in the manga, there's like a one little page of him falling down the stairs, which is probably like where this scene was inspired to come from. We don't get to see his point of view in the manga. We get to see it in the anime. I think this is very intentional for things that are gonna occur in the future. I'm not gonna talk about it too much due to spoilers, but what I will say is that they do not want you to forget that Tamayo and Yushiro are important characters. Do not forget about them. They are important. I know they're underrated. They're in my top 5 favorite characters for a reason. Once Yushiro makes it down the stairs to find Tamayo, he says that they should leave immediately and that he's ready to go. He has everything that he needs, which I couldn't help but think that like he always has everything ready to go because he doesn't need anything but her because he loves her so much and respects her and cares about her. I don't ship them, but I do find their bond to be very unique and loving, and so I do kind of like, you know, support his respect for her. So I thought that was really sweet. We get a very interesting flashback that Tamayo has where it's this still image of her and a person looking at someone else who we've actually already seen in past episodes from season 1, Swordsmith Village arc. And so this actually wasn't in the manga until very later, when that flashback is explained more. And so they're giving us that little spark of interest now that there's still more to learn about Tamayo's story. This part had me absolutely squealing because I'm ecstatic to get to that part in the anime. The scene ends with Tamayo stating that this could very well be their final move. We get a shot of Yushiro's face, and to me he looks a little scared but mainly determined. I think it's kind of the fear of the unknown for him at this point. If she's saying that this is their last move, that could mean very dark things in their future. And we know that both of them are going to be very important coming up because of what we now know about needing Tamayo at the Hashira Manor to help Shinobu. And so this part is also very interesting and also very important. Cue the tears. I was sobbing after this scene. I also have like an abnormal amount of love for these two characters, so most people in the world probably just sat through that scene and were like, yep, moving on, let's go. No, I was sobbing. This isn't really a comparison to the manga, but just something cool to point out is that the title page for this episode has Gyu's background on it very faintly, so we're probably gonna get to see like each Hashira's pattern as we get their episodes, because what I'm predicting is like next week's episode will be about Tengen, from there it'll be Muichiro, and then Mitsuri, Obanai, Sanemi, Gyome, although toward the end it'll get a little sketchy just because they'll probably have to start combining stuff, plus more things happen other than the training, so I just thought that was a cool touch. Moving on, in both the manga and the anime, Kagaya explains to Tanjiro the contents of the letter. And so he's basically explaining that he has to be persistent with Gyu, he wants the best for him, and he thinks that Tanjiro is the best fit to help with that. And so something that was not explained in the manga was Tanjiro's conflict over what to do in that situation. Of course, we know he wants to help him, that's what Tanjiro does best, but in the anime, he actually reaches out to Aoi for advice. Tanjiro asks Aoi, what do I tell someone so that they don't feel alone? And Aoi doesn't really have advice for that, but what her advice is that you should just leave the person alone. However, she does give Tanjiro some rice balls, which I thought was really sweet because something that is very heavily emphasized in the Japanese culture is sitting down, having a nice meal. That's when you can bond more with your family. It's kind of like a very special part of the day, which I think that scene was a cool little tidbit of Japanese culture that wasn't exactly in the manga, but a cool thing to add in the anime. So moving on to Tanjiro's persisting of Gyu. This part in the manga didn't last like at all. Like it was so short and it basically just showed like 1 or 2 scenes of Tanjiro like persisting Gyu, and then it just said 4 days later and then they're on the bridge. So this scene went completely all out. Thank you to the people who made this because it made probably so many manga readers happy. Gyu lovers all around. Gyu is my second favorite Hashira, so I love him. I loved all the scenes that they showed that were extra. So like the bathtub scene, of course, the bathroom scene, Tanjiro's waiting outside Gyu's house, just like spending the night on like the planks outside his front door. He's being persistent. That's what Kagaya wanted, so gotta give him credit, I guess. We have Gyu leave this kind of angry conversation between him and Tanjiro in his house. He's very dramatic about it, which is kind of funny, but like, you know, he is going through stuff, and what he's going through is very real. It's things that you could connect to the real world with emotions and mental state, so very serious at the end of the day. But after that, we get plenty more scenes of Tanjiro persisting Gyu, which is the absolute cutest, although if someone were doing that to me, I think I'd lose my mind. Like, there kind of comes a point when you should just, I don't know how to explain it, but being an introvert, if someone's like running after you and like following you constantly, like just shouting your name, and oh my gosh, I would be so like embarrassed. I mean, I'm like Gyu, so I would be very uncomfortable and probably a little irritated and probably would just want to crawl in a dark hole and curl up. About halfway through this episode, we finally get to the bridge scene with Tanjiro and Gyu finally just comes out and says to Tanjiro that he did not pass final selection. Of course, Tanjiro is confused, and he was very confused in the manga too, but I feel like his visual in the anime was so much better. Again, once you add color and more shapes to characters, of course they're going to be more lively. I also just wanted to say that this scene on the bridge, the water was gorgeous. The backgrounds in this new season are just amazing. Gyu explains to Tanjiro what happened during final selection with his old friend Sabito, which of course we remember from season 1 in the first couple episodes during Tanjiro's training for final selection. And so this whole part was very much the same for the manga and the anime. the anime just had more visuals. When we skip to the part when Gyu is reaching out to Sabito as he's running away, we get this really cool imagery of blood dripping down his face, blurring his vision so much that he blacks out, and we wake up with Gyu and a couple of his Slayer friends kind of on the floor on his bed, getting rest and healing up. And not only did I think that those extra visuals were incredible, but we also got more of Murata. So we of course know Murata from the Spider arc of season 1, and we actually in the manga only see Murata's, you know, his hairstyle, his kind of silhouette. We can tell it's him, but like if you're not super paying attention to the details, you're not gonna know who it is. But in the anime, there he is, clearly Murata. He's important to the story. He's the Slayer that just happens to survive everything, it appears. So cool to see him again. We knew from season 1 that he was in the same year as Gyu, so that's cool to see him reappear. So this next part is kind of cool because they switched it up in the anime to kind of match other Hashiras that we've seen in the past. And so it's the scene when Gyu is explaining that he doesn't feel like he fits in with the Hashira, he's not like them. And in the manga, he's telling that to Tanjiro on the bridge, but in the anime, we see this flashback of him explaining that to Kagaya, which I think is so fitting because in the Swordsmith Village arc, we kind of got a similar scene of Mitsuri explaining to Kagaya kind of similar thoughts just along her thinking and her growth and storyline. We also, of course, saw that with Muichiro when he was healing next to Kagaya when he came to the Hashira Manor. So I think it's really cool that Kagaya is still a part of the Hashira's lives. We're still seeing that and getting those flashbacks to when he wasn't as cursed as he is now with his vision gone. We know that he can't move, and so it's really sweet to see Kagaya, more of him from when, you know, back then. This part also gives a lot of insight to when Gyu told Kagaya, because Kagaya's face was still about halfway cursed with the purplish texture. And so we know that Gyu has been feeling this way for a long time. It's not something that just randomly sprang about. So in the manga, this actually ends chapter 130 and we start 131. So before this whole bridge scene is over, there's a really important key difference from the manga to the anime. And it actually makes a pretty big impact on the storyline. So when Gyu is kind of pondering his thoughts on his past with Sabito when he slapped him and the reason why for that, Gyu says in the anime that he is ready to train. Well, he begins to say that, but Tanjiro kind of interrupts him. In the manga, he explains that he has training to get to. So in the manga, it's kind of telling that Gyu had to train himself, whereas in the anime, it was showing that Gyu was ready to train Tanjiro. So I think this is incredibly such a key detail that's so different from the manga to the anime, that's also very intentional, because we know that Tanjiro has now made an influence on Gyu. We saw that Sabito made that same influence. We've seen time and time again that that is what Tanjiro does. He helps people through their problems and it makes him, you know, happy and grateful. And so I think that is a really important key difference, especially for what's to come. It also helps with that kind of brotherly bond that Tanjiro and Gyu are now starting to form. The whole Gyu scene ends, of course, when we transition to the scene with Shinobu. Something that was slightly different is that in the manga, we just kind of see just a transition to Shinobu. In this, we see that Gyu is actually the one that asks about Shinobu and if she's doing training, why is she not doing training? So that was really interesting that Shinobu was on Gyu's mind. So moving on to this scene with Shinobu, as I stated in my past video, this is the scene that kind of was combined in the first episode. So in the manga, we see that this is where Kanao returns. She tells Shinobu that she's gonna be training with the Wind Hashira. In the anime, she's already there. She's already talked to Shinobu, they've had a conversation, but she still has the same kind of conversation with Shinobu now that she did in the manga. And so all of this was pretty much the same. Shinobu is going to tell Kanao about the demon who killed her sister. It's at this point in the manga where we get the scene of Tamayo and the Ubuyashiki Crow, which of course we already saw at the end of episode 1 and the beginning of episode 2. So just again, they're just flipping around some of that material. In the manga, this is when we end chapter 131 and we start chapter 132. So that chapter was pretty quick. A lot of that Giyu stuff was covered in the anime pretty spot on, just with those key differences that I think are very important to note for the future. So the Taisho secret was really cool because this isn't something that's just outright said in the manga during Giyu's whole kind of backstory. And so it's that Giyu, his Hiyori, is half of Sabito's pattern and half of his sister's pattern, which is really symbolic. This is something that I figured out like, you know, years ago when I read the manga, but it's not something that's just outright stated, at least in that part with the backstory. So that was a cool Taisho secret for those of you who have been wondering the whole time why he has that specific patterning. Also, I know I'm not really giving too much of my thoughts on the actual content itself, but Giyu smiling made my whole world just beam. I've been waiting to see this man like genuinely smile, so I'm sure that's gonna be posted like everywhere. It is at this time that I have finished the episode talking about it, so if you have any questions about my actual thoughts on the episode, let me know in the comments and of course I can answer them. If you wanted more insight to the manga, I can tell you, but this is all from book 15, and I'm very excited to see what we have in store for us next, which is of course Tengen, which is a very short part of the book, but I'm sure we'll see like so much anime only content for it. And so it's at this point that I am gonna be talking about manga spoilers for a couple books after this one. And so it's at this point that you should leave if you have not read the manga. I don't want to spoil you. Of course, feel free to come back later. I hope you enjoyed this video. So bye to those people, and we're gonna get started with some spoilers, starting now. So I apologize for this, but being a manga reader myself, I can't help but think about all of the emotional things that we're gonna see in the future compared to like all of the happiness that we're seeing in the Hashira training arc, and how a lot of this happiness is like the last we're gonna see before this final battle. And so I wanted to kind of briefly talk about the scene with Kanao and Shinobu. Kanao says that she hopes to train with Shinobu some more. I would like to kindly remind you that this is not gonna happen because in a couple books, Shinobu's gonna die. Why? They're all just like children, super young people. All of these scenes that are happening that are just like super lighthearted and just happy. It's just, of course, Kanao is just like, yay, I'm excited to train with you again, with her master. And no, because in a little while, Muzan's gonna attack. And everything is done for because of Muzan and what Doma does to Shinobu. And oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm just gonna cry, but just keep that in mind. They're seeding these things in now to make us more emotional later, so that's about it. Why do I end these videos on such sad notes? Anyway, thank you so much for watching if you made it to the end and are a manga reader. I hope I did not spoil any of you. It's not my fault if you got spoiled. I did have a warning. I will see you next time when we talk about episode 3 about Tengen. Bye!